that is why I'm no longer there. It became very controversial to have such an aggressive marketing and sales team. I think we were too successful in attracting the attention of other agencies, where the agency we were working with wanted to protect what was being built.
Today's guest is Annie Wyatt, a children's book author who blends realistic environments with elements of fantasy to spark young imaginations. With a background in design, marketing, and technology, Annie's journey spans high school in Switzerland, Parsons School of Design, and leadership roles in marketing and technology. In this episode, we explore how her international experiences shaped her creativity, the challenges of balancing art and business, and the heartfelt inspiration behind the popular children's book, All Kinds of Castles. Let's start the show.
First of all, I'm so excited to see you again. It's been a long time. Thank you for being on. There's a number of different directions I think we can go with this. I sort of want to pick at something from your history that a few things that I'm curious about. So high school in Switzerland.
Yes.
Where did that come from? What's that all about?
Oh, it's a fun story. So I'm originally from the North Shore of Boston. Love it. Go Red Sox. And a lot of members of my family went to Phillips Exeter Academy, and I was always a nerd growing up. And so I asked my parents if I could spend a summer at Phillips Exeter, leaning into art history, English, always things I was really passionate about, very right-minded of the brain. And I met all these really international kids, people speaking multiple language, people from different religious backgrounds, so much diversity. And I came home and I said to my parents, I love my high school, I love my friends, but I want more. And I'm like 14 years old. And they're like, okay, so let's talk about it. And in New England, there are a lot of boarding schools or private schools or whatever. But I think I had been bit by the international bug, and I really wanted to expand my horizons. I think to my parents' horror, I've always been extremely independent. So I started to look at schools overseas, and I found some really incredible schools in London and in Rome. And then I found the American School of Switzerland, which was very small, and had a very good art program at the time. I've always been very artistic. And I got in, but I grew up in a pretty blue collar environment. So my parents were like, we simply can't afford it. And so I actually ended up getting almost a free ride to go to school, to high school overseas, which I have no shame in. I'm so proud of. My parents have worked so hard their whole lives, but my mom was a school teacher. You know, you're not sending your daughter to Swiss boarding school off that. But yeah, I got a really nice opportunity to go overseas. I spent my junior and senior year over there. I met some of the most incredible people, still some of my best friends to today. And it kind of launched me into having a more international appreciation, lifestyle, background, everything.
Well, so a couple of things. When you talk about just having the desire at 14 to go over there, where does that come from? What was missing from what you had, and where does that drive to go beyond what you were used to come from?
Yeah, I'm going to be so honest with you, because I just think vulnerability hopefully leads to education. But I think that summer in Phillips Exeter, I felt a lot of shame that I was very ignorant about people's religion, customs, traditions, everything. And I never really wanted to feel that again. I have always really, like I said, I was a nerd. So I believe in education. I believe in expanding your horizons. I believe in being very well-rounded. My parents raised me that you read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Like every coin has two sides. And I just think I felt a lot of shame and I wanted to overcome that. So I kind of went pretty extreme. And saying,
so wait, what do your parents do? Or did
my dad was always a CFO in finance his whole life. He's just very fiscally responsible and conservative. And I'm so thankful because it's created incredible benchmarks and morals for me to follow as a parent. I respect my father so much. And my mom was a fifth grade school teacher on the North Shore of Boston, you know, so they have very, very respectful professions, but yeah.
Well, covering both sides of the spectrum in terms of, you know, sort of who they're around and where they're coming from. When when you talk about the shame about the religion, like, can you give me an example of what you're talking about and what you found when you were in Switzerland? Obviously, there's a confluence of different languages and
For sure.
certainly cultures, but talk to me a little bit about the shame and then the transition to sort of immersing yourself in that culture.
Halal food, such a great example. Muslims, why do they eat foods of this way, and how is it that an animal is sacrificed to be approved in halal, and having that classification of halal food? Or why people are fasting and how they're fasting for so long. As an American, my father's Greek Orthodox, but I was raised as a Congregationalist, Presbyterian, basically. I've never fasted. I fasted for 12 hours out of I'm camping with my friends. I don't know. So people that are fasting for multiple days for religious beliefs, it was so beautiful to learn about that and find respect for that. And then be more cognizant of that, a moment that changed my life was something that TASIS offers is immersive programs for a week or two. And we went to Romania and we visited. I was 16 years old, girl from Boston, never left the nest, in Romania at an orphanage. And some of my girlfriends and I went to a little bodega and we bought the orphans, who were our age all the way down to infancy, Coke, Diet Coke. And we got back to the orphanage and we were completely reprimanded, because we were so ignorant that these children have never drank Coca-Cola and what this would do to their systems. It was just like, I just didn't think. I wasn't expanding my knowledge. How would I know that, So I think it really allowed me to be more of a global citizen, cognizant of people's backgrounds, what they've been through, and why they are the way they are.
How does that shape your perspective now, especially as a mom?
Oh, this is bad. The first thing that came to my head is I overthink everything. I think my husband, Kyle, he is the most supportive person in the whole world, but he often tells me, like, Annie, stop overthinking it. But I'm trying just to be very cognizant and hyper aware of people and situations. I really try to put myself in other people's shoes. And probably too much, because I'm a sponge. I cry all the time. I can't see someone cry or I'll cry. I'm an empathetic crier.
Well, do you think that, using that as a springboard, do you think that there's got to be some connection between that sensitivity and the artistry that you ultimately pursued?
Absolutely. I guess jumping over to books, reading to my children is one of the most sacred parts of the day. It's so calm. It's so warm. You have like these little minds that you can craft and educate. And I love reading books to them, but I am hyper aware of the concept of books and the message that's being delivered and what they're digesting, because you're a father of a young child. They are so impressionable. Children are so impressionable. So I try to be really cognizant of that with the message I deliver.
So where did the artistry come from? I mean, when you went to Switzerland, it sounds like, what kind of artistry are you referring to? Was it visual arts? Was it in writing? Like, talk to me a little bit about the development and evolution of what style you ended up choosing.
It was oil painting. I have such a deep respect for oil painting because of the patience. You paint on a canvas and it takes so long for those oils to dry. Whereas with acrylic, you can come back 4 hours later and the canvas will be dry and you can build and paint over it. I just fell in love with the world of oil paints. And I think TASIS projected me into a career and an ambition where I was actually going to be an art restorer. So I started to take chemistry classes. This is one of the coolest professions. I don't know if you know if this exists. I didn't. But there are people that go into museums, the Met in New York City, where artwork is cracking, and they restore it. They actually take off the pigment. They recreate it as it was created in ancient times. And then they have the artistic capabilities to actually restore it themselves. It is one hand touching this canvas. And you're talking some of the masters. I thought that was so incredible. I got into St. Andrews to pursue this profession of art history and chemistry. And then I got a phone call from my parents, and it was spring break senior year. And they asked me to come home, like straight up. My dad was working in New York City at the time. I believe he was at Thomson Reuters, and they were like, "We miss you. Come on home. Have you heard about Parsons?" And I was like, "I'm not going to Parsons. I'm going to St. Andrews." And they were like, "Come check out Parsons." I went to campus. I fell in love with the new school, fell in love with Parsons. And at the time, Parsons was offering basically a business degree in arts. And I just think I had kind of that come to Jesus of, I don't think I want to be a struggling artist my whole life. It's a very romanticized profession. But I'm not greedy, but I wanted to have financial security. I wanted to have a more conservative approach to my profession. So I thought it was perfect where I'd get my business degree and then I'd always pursue the arts. So most people, I'd say 90% of the people that graduated from my major work for some of the top design agencies in New York City. Either they've created their own agencies or they work for agencies. I loved my time at Parsons. I did still a little oil painting and pursued that. But I also learned to sketch. Like I'm talking pencil and paper sketching, something that was very uncommon to my practice, but I spent hours a week doing pencil sketches, charcoal sketches. And then I really just saw the security and the opportunity to pursue a profession in business with that artistic background. And that's where I graduated with my business degree. I went to work for an agency. I went to work for some small companies. I spent a long time at Savills. And I've just moved into this direction of marketing and technology. And I've always had designers somewhere, either reporting into me or in my structure. And I love it. I love it. I love the security of it. But if you could see behind this camera, I have a 6.5-foot canvas with oil painting on it. So I still, dabble, and I illustrate children's books now. So it's great.
I want to talk about the children's books, but before, as we sort of move our way forward, I want to ask, when you were at Parsons, I find it super fascinating, the intersection of art and business, because it's not always a smooth landing, in that intersection. And just by virtue of being in LA, I see that intersection in the form of film primarily. And, when other people get involved, the vision starts to get potentially distorted, and it really sort of highlights the magic that happens when something comes out great, that all of these people all contributed to make something that actually was in line with what they had intended. I guess that background, I'm curious, what did you see yourself doing from Parsons? I mean, when you're thinking of, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and I thought the only thing you could be was a doctor, lawyer, or educator, really, And so I didn't know. I mean, if I were I thought about going into law and was going down that path, but I stopped because I didn't want to be a lawyer. Had I known you could have gotten a law degree and not necessarily been a lawyer and had a lot of practical applications, that just goes to show how immature my thought process was then. So I'm just curious, when you went to Parsons, how were you envisioning the future?
Yeah. One of the greatest things about Parsons is there are so many well-known people that have graduated from such a small school. So for those that don't know that are listening, Parsons is an art school in New York City, part of the New School liberal arts institution, but major fashion designers have graduated from Parsons. What's the show? The runway show.
Talking to the wrong person, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, Heidi Klum was on it. There's a show, a runway show. It's old now. I don't think they show it. But it blew Parsons up for being a fashion institution. And because of that, and because of the alumni, so many of our classes, alumni came in. So CMOs, CTOs, CFOs from major fashion houses to talk to us and say, there's a world beyond, art and paper. And these are the careers you could do. So I think we were able to really dream and say, I could be that person. So when I started to understand the world of marketing, how it is the intersection between business and the business of design, of storytelling, of visual storytelling, not only verbal, I got really inspired because I was like, oh, this just opened up the world to me. Almost every company under the sun has a marketing department. And over the last 15 years, to age myself, but over the last 15 years, that's all I've done is focus it focused on roles in marketing. And I've gone from working with the Department of Defense, Savills, commercial real estate, now insurance data. It's been so fun because I get to kind of reinvent myself every 5 to 7 years when I switch companies.
So I want to talk about reinventing yourself, but before that, tell me about this Department of Defense company that you were at.
Okay.
How much can you share?
No, I can share everything. It's all public information. There's nothing secret going on. So you and I both know Savills, an incredible organization. I extremely respected the people I reported into. I started working at Savills, call it 10 years ago, overseeing marketing for the Carolinas. By the time I left, I had the opportunity to work under Patrick McGrath and oversee technology enablement for the Americas. So much fun. Loved it. Loved the team. Loved the work I was doing. COVID hits and I have a 3-month-old. And I think I just became very bearish about the commercial real estate industry and the inspiration I needed to wake up every day and apply myself 100% to my job as a technology marketer for this global company. So I ended up stepping away from Savills truly for the purpose of wanting to feel like every day I was giving back a little bit more. So cheesy, but I think we were all in that world in COVID of like, what am I doing with my life? There was a lot of questioning we all did. And so I found a company, BidScale, loved it. I was probably the 10th, 11th employee. And it was a federal SaaS company. So this was a world where I was like, cool. I oversaw the marketing division at the time. And I got the opportunity actually to build the marketing division. So small, rapidly growing tech company from a team that had left to Deloitte to build this. And it was fully funded by the DoD. So it was the first time I really got to work with a lot of veterans. I got to build technology. I got to build a marketing department. It was incredible. It was like fast paced, high energy, extremely intense.
What was the business?
So the world of contracting, massive, billion dollar industry every year for the DoD. People come in and say, we're going to write a contract for doorknobs or we're going to write a contract for fighter jets. It takes 3 to 5 years to get these contracts through, approved, whatever. If anyone from BidScale is listening, excuse what I'm about to say in layman's terms, but we were basically building the DocuSign for contracts for the Department of Defense to expedite the process.
And what role how does marketing fit into that process?
Well, this is where it got a little sticky. We were looking for other agencies to work with. So the DOE, the DOJ, NASA, any other agency to come in. But I think that is why I'm no longer there. It became very controversial to have such an aggressive marketing and sales team. I think we were too successful in attracting the attention of other agencies, where the agency we were working with wanted to protect what was being built.
So, I mean, I have to dumb this down a little bit for myself, but in this capacity, are you trying to get contracts on behalf of these other agencies? Or are you getting these agencies to talk to me a little bit more about that? Because I think I'm losing where the rubber meets the road there.
We were the tool that contractors, so contracting officers at agencies would use to, again, layman's terms, redline a contract.
Got it. And then from there, now where are you?
Yes. So there was a mass layoff about a year and a half ago. I was one of the members of the team along with the full marketing department. And so I was out there, like, let's find a new job. I now have 2 small children, extremely stressful times for our family. But I saw an opening at a company called Verisk. And I had known of Verisk because of my time at Savills. And I really respected the company. I respected the brand. I remember running presentations to the C-suite and executives and feeling like they were buttoned up. They were communicative. And I was like, this is someone I could work for. Landed a job at Verisk. At the time, I was working, I was director of demand generation for Verisk Marketing Solutions under a woman, Zora Sennett, that, wow, one of the best bosses I ever had. And I spent about a year, 12 months in that role. And just in about May or June this year, I was promoted to the underwriting team. And now I'm overseeing domestic underwriting, 3 lines of business, personal, commercial, and auto. So much fun. Anyone out there, come work for Verisk. It's a great organization.
So I want to go back to something you said about reinventing yourself, because I think there's a few sort of threads, I think, not excluding within the book, all kinds of castles, but how did the genesis of wanting to make this book? Maybe let's start with what changed, what transpired, how did you find yourself evolving through the pandemic and having a kid? How did that influence your trajectory?
Well, you know this. The second you bring a child into the world, you are never the same person. It spins you upside down. You are so exhausted. You're living off of 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night. You don't know which way is left, but you're so madly in love with this little human that I think it changed my life for the better to have my son, Arthur, especially during the pandemic, where talk about mama bear intensified because you're like, you can't breathe the air outside because you might get sick. But when we speak about reinventing ourselves, I just wanted to do, and I still to this day want to do something my children are so proud of. I look at my parents and I respect their careers so much, the hard work. But the other beautiful thing about the household I was raised in is my parents were extremely present. They never missed anything. Sports matches, dinner. My mother had dinner on the table every night at 6. It was an open door policy. Anyone can come. But I grew up in an extremely loving and extremely supportive household. And I hope to do that for my children. So talk about reinventing yourself. I know I have the security of this marketing technology profession that I'm going down the path of, and I love what I do. I think technology in the world of MarTech is extremely inspirational. But there's always been that hint that goes back to 14-year-old Annie, where I wanted to be a little bit more creative and artistic. So sitting with my son, when he learned to talk, which is such a joy, the things that come out of those little mouths, he thought everything was a castle. So we're like in the car wash and he's like, Mama, we're in the car castle, or we're getting gas, we're in the gas castle, or the grocery store, the cookie castle. And I was just like, wow, I could pull this into written word and I'd have the opportunity to illustrate as well. So I started, again, the nerd in me, to do extensive research about children's books and what makes a children's book successful. And rhyming verse is one of the most important things for a child, especially a child a little bit older, 3 to 4 years old, learning to read or really expand their vocabulary because of how words rhyme. So I wrote the book in rhyming verse, and then I got really scared to do the illustrations. My art hasn't been out there since I was 18. I just wasn't ready to do it. So I hired an illustrator and we produced the first book. Loved it, but a lot of the audience fell in love with the horse. So that's where I've produced my second book, A Horse in the Castle. And I just said, screw it. I'm gonna do the illustrations and throw my art out there and see how people react. And it's been nice so far. So here we are.
Well, you sort of glossed over something that I think is a feat, right? I mean, to take time out of your normal job, to put this together, to visualize it in your brain, to actually write it. What's the process of publishing? How do you go about finding where to get it out and how to get it out to the right audience?
Yeah. So the process of publishing is backbreaking, to be gentle with it. So basically what you do is you write a query letter. It's a cover page. It's a cover letter as if you were applying to a job, and you say, this is my book. This might be a sample of it. And you go and you reach out to publishing houses. It is so rare a publishing house will pick someone up. I don't have a following. I'm not an influencer or anything, so I didn't have that ground to walk on. But I did get an email back from someone at Simon & Schuster and said, we do not pick up authors or illustrators outside of those represented by an agent, which is also something I didn't know. But you should look into Archway Publishing. It's a subsidiary of ours, and it's considered hybrid publishing. So there's 3 routes you can publish. You can self-publish, which I recommend for no one because of the quality of the book. You don't have an editorial team. It's just very hard to go to market. You can hybrid publish, which I do. So I'm under the umbrella of Simon & Schuster with Archway Publishing. I have all their marketing support. They get me on all the right platforms, but there's that upfront cost for printing and support and things like that that we make back on the tail end. Or if you are lucky enough, an agent picks you up and says, I believe in your vision. I'm going to go scout you out to the big houses.
So then when was All Kinds of Castles published?
December 2021. I think. Is that awful? I don't know. I think it's December.
No,
let me look. December 2021.
2022.
2022.
That's a revision date. Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you learned going through that first book?
Yeah.
What's your takeaway? And what would you tell yourself back then, what you know now? What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing that comes to mind that I learned with publishing a book is you have to have a beast of a marketing program behind you. I think this book, it would have been a tree in a forest falling if I didn't have a professional background in marketing and knew how to sell it, get out there. I think I'm in today 160 independent bookstores in the United States. I've sold over 700 copies, and it's just because I hustle and I'm researching bookstores. I'm sending them very personalized emails. I'm building email marketing programs. I'm finding these kind of mommy and daddy influencers on social media platforms for a very affordable rate to talk about the book. Like, I'm just trying to get the book out there. Because I know, and this is where I get really cheesy, but I know as a parent, if you have the right book, children will fall in love and they'll want to read it every night and they'll pull it off their bookshelf and they'll say, Mommy, Daddy, let's read this one. And it's just such a darling moment that I want to provide that for a couple kids. So
how does that sink in, though, to think that there's at least 700 people out there reading your words that are going to live well beyond your life?
Yeah. Well, let's be real. I'd say about 100 are my mother-in-law and my mom. They're
fair enough. It's a start. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. It is awesome. My neighbor, my sweet, sweet neighbor, Emery, she loves the book. I know it. Her mom tells me all the time. I was actually at the grocery store one day. I read to all of the daycare classes at my boys' school, and a little boy came up to me and said, "You're the author." And I was like, "Oh, I am. I'll read to you right now." It was just so sweet. So it makes me happy. I can bring a little bit of joy to the kids out there.
I'm wondering if you've thought about sort of, as you've read it, because something that stuck out, and you'll have to excuse me because like I said, the more recent book didn't make it in time, and unfortunately scheduled to get it today. But as I'm reading this, the imagination that's entailed here, I'm gonna sort of go in a circular pattern here, but I'll land the plane. We're in a good time where you can watch a Pixar movie and actually enjoy as an adult what you're watching because there's dual meanings. It's not just entertaining and funny to children, but Inside Out, sort of a perfect example of how it's actually talking about something pretty meaningful and a lot deeper. And I wonder if you saw it or you intended it for it, but I found when I was reading it that there's something really beautiful about. I've been doing a lot of work like on shadow self. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but Carl Jung talks about, and I think this came to the forefront for me when I saw my son for the first time and seeing him grow up. There's no shame. He is in his purest form, right? He is in his nature 100% of the time. And this is before the world sort of beats down on you and tells you can't do that. That's not appropriate. This part of your personality is not this or that. And as you grow up, those parts of your personality can start to get overshadowed and belittled. And eventually those could potentially become demons. Those could become a part of your person that's really your gem that ends up sort of sequestered. And something I found when I was reading this was this beautiful place in your head that you can always go back to, or in your heart, that's sort of safe, that's your own, and that it's something that even though it's a children's book, I found myself thinking, why wouldn't it apply to adults?
That's a huge compliment. So thank you. I think there is a thought in my mind, and it speaks to the last page of the book, where your home is wherever your loved ones are. And that doesn't say your home is wherever your family is, because there's a lot of people out there where friends, mentors feel like family, feel like home, because it's safe for them and it's loving. And so definitely that final message about the home, and that's where your heart is, did resonate for me, and want to speak to the reader that's reading to that child, because I think especially in COVID, we had time was of the essence. When you were getting on a plane and you were seeing people, you had to be really thoughtful about where you were investing your time, friends, family, whoever it was. And so, yeah, I just think we all have to remember, surround yourself with those that make you feel really good, with those that make you feel loved and safe. And that's your home. And that's okay if it's not family, or if it is, great, lean into it. Go visit your family, you know?
Well, I think that's a good lesson to learn about home being an evolution. I'm very interested in the idea of, to go back to what you were talking about in reinventing yourself. I think we get so stuck in our identity oftentimes, and I think it comes through cycles. But for me personally, I had this identity up until high school, and then you get this opportunity when you go into college where you can sort of redefine yourself, and then that sort of happens, and maybe there's some vestigial component there that goes into your early adulthood as a professional, and you start to find your way and your path there, and you get into these rhythms. I don't know what the ages are for different people, but, I certainly got into rhythms into my 30s. And then, whether it's an outside force or an inside force that ends up sort of uprooting some of the beliefs you had, or maybe the perspectives that you have. I find it fascinating when you end up shedding some of that skin and coming out of it. It's not that you change. I think it just exudes more of who you are, right? Of who you've always been. And I see that, again, I keep going back to a kid, but there's something so simple about a child when you see him up close about, my son at 22 months is very much the same kid he was at 6 months, but he's completely different, and there's no similarity. And in that process, I sort of wonder, he can't relate to that former person. Why are we trying to relate to our former selves in a lot of ways? And this goes to a very common theme within our zeitgeist about, presence and being available in the now, not living in the future or the past. But I think, honestly, reinventing yourself is such a critical component to growth. And it's not always easy to do when it's presented to you. And I guess, what's next for you? Now that you've gone through this, how have you changed? And what do you see, what new horizons are opening as a result of this? Has anything come back to you from putting this book out? How have you shape-shifted?
Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful message you just shared about change. And I think one of the things we struggle with as adults is, how do we articulate we've changed almost to those closest around us, because they are molding us into whatever it was stage of our lives, 2 years old, 5 years old, 12 years old, 25 years old. So how do you educate those you love most? Like, I've changed, and I think I've changed for the better. And these are attributes or things that I've done to change. And it's exactly what you said. I think there's been three major times in my life, I have changed. One was obviously my high school experience. Another was meeting my husband, a man I love and respect so much. He had so many attributes of his lifestyle, of his approach to the world that altered me for the better, and just opened my eyes to a lot of things I didn't know. And then having a child, obviously, you change. But I think for me, I'm actually in a place in my life where I normally lean in to change so much, and I want to grind it out and I want to accept it. And I actually just want to let the tide settle for a second. And I want to keep excelling in my role. I've just been promoted 2 or 3 months ago. I want to lean into my new management, lean into my team, and just find opportunities for success. But I think in any corporate environment, that takes time. That's an 18, 24-month period of where you're just settling and building and reporting, doing all that good stuff. So professionally, I just want to settle and excel. As a mother and with a 2 and a 4-year-old, my husband, my dog, things are so good. I'm very thankful. I count my blessings every morning and every night. I think we just want to start traveling again, seeing the world. We rarely travel, the 4 of us, or 5 plus Winston. But I think my husband and I are really eager to just get on the road and just have like those intimate family trips where we're showing the world to the boys and educating them. And when it comes to children's books, oh man, like I love it. I love it so much. I could write so many things, and the illustrations were, I felt like a phoenix when I was illustrating again. So yeah, I started with sketches of the artwork and then moved them digitally. I'd never used a stylus before. Like I know every kid in art school is using that now, these electronic pens, but I had to teach myself how with Illustrator to use a digital sketch pad and a stylus, which made me just feel archaic. So I was like, how do you get the sketch on the paper? Are we scanning it? Like, where's the printer with the scanner on top? You know, like that's how old I am. But I think we're going to let ourselves settle professionally, the home life, and probably keep writing some children's books because it sparks so much joy and it's such a rewarding experience.
Looking back, any big takeaways that you're proudest of?
My babies. I know that's like such a classic parent thing, but I genuinely have 2 children that are very happy. And I think if you ask them, they knew they were really, really loved. So like, what else can you provide in the world, you know? So, yeah.
Well, this is super exciting. I got to give you credit because I'm reading more children's books than I ever have in my life. And there's a lot of crap out there, to be honest. I'm surprised it makes it on the paper.
Yeah.
The rhymes are horrible. And when you find something that fits, it stands out. So I applaud not just the effort that you put into this, but the quality of it is, it's a good message and it's an easy read and fun to be a part of in that small journey. And I'm looking forward to more of these coming out. Do you have any closing thoughts, any predictions, any ideas of what might come next?
No. When you say predictions, I think about the election, and I'm not going down that. That's a whole nother podcast for another day. But no, thanks for the time. It was great to see you again. This was a lovely conversation. So thanks.
Well, thanks for being on, and be sure to put all this in the show notes so that people can get their hands on this. And thanks for being on. It was great to see you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you put out there.
Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Okay.